The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, September 17th, 2019. I'm Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins. As always, how you doing today, Duane?
I'm doing well. I'm just actually on Sunday of this week, Kevin. I watched Our Lady Peace. I don't know if you remember Our Lady Peace.
Oh my Lord!
Had their Yeah. There was about 5,000 people at the concert, so pretty good show considering they're all in their 50s now. Most of the crowd, let's be honest.
Most of the crowd were in their 50s too. I imagine Our Lady Peace. I was Clumsy. I remember that album, Clumsy. All big shiny P12.
And you know who opened for them?
Bush.
You remember Bush?
I remember Bush X.
Yeah, well, they were just Bush in Canada. Anyway, we should do a music podcast one day.
Sure.
But for now, that's just been in my head all day. So I've been still, just as I was listening to our intro, I was like having Naveed in my head. So there you go.
All right.
Our Lady Peace podcast.
While Dwayne's remembering his late 20s, listening to Canadian rock.
Mid-20s, thank you.
Mid-20s. We're here getting ready to talk about Europe, because Tuesdays are for Europe. We'll talk about our European games that we followed this weekend later on in the show. We'll look as well at the Champions League, which starts today. The group stage starts today. The first American coach ever to coach in the Champions League today, Jesse Marsch, former Montreal Impact and Red Bulls coach, which is kind of hilarious when you look at the state of those two teams right now, and their former coach with Montreal did not believe in Jesse Marsch. I guess someone was wrong in that as well. But before we go there, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to our bread and butter, Major League Soccer, stadiums and bans. Yes, we're going there today. We're going to talk about the political ban on banners. Of course, ban on banners. Trying to say that 10 times really quickly. But Duane, it's been a few weeks now that this is happening across the league, with some instances being way more, I would say, mainstream than others, especially the Timbers Army, Emerald City supporters in Seattle, and the Timbers Army in Portland doing walkouts to protest bans, and especially a ban on fans who were waving those flags or signs. Some of them were banned for a long time, and some of them are high members, I would say, of the front office of certain groups like ECS and Timbers Army were banned. But let's start with a little bit of history. Duane, can you explain to us a little bit the ban on banners right now in Major League Soccer?
Well, even explaining the history of it is somewhat controversial to some people, but to the best of my knowledge and the kind of majority opinion is this started basically, there is a group of fans that go to NYCFC games that are self-defined white nationalists or Nazis. They define themselves as this. They believe in the superiority of the white race, which is, we all understand, and we can all start as a base point. Anyway, if you actually believe that, by all means, thanks for listening, but goodbye, right? And I think we'll all start from there. But there was a pushback against them. It hit mainstream attention. So MLS's response on this was to ban what they called political banners and displays in stadiums. But the problem with this, of course, is what does the word political mean? And this has led to the banning of the Iron Front banners, which is the three arrows that you'll see. And you'll see it on Twitter with the three arrows thing. Now, if you look at the history of this symbol, of this flag, it stems back to the 30s in Europe, in Germany, when people were resisting.
Yeah, sorry, Dwayne. You see right now on your screen the origin of that three iron symbol with the logo of the three strikes pointing towards the logo of the communist symbol of the U.S. Federation, Russian Federation back then, the Nazis, and as well Japan. So that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and it was an anti-fascist banner and symbol. This has since been adopted by a group, depending on how you pronounce it, either a TIFA or an Antifa, depending. I've heard it said both ways, but it means anti-fascist, which is controversial right now, particularly in the United States. And it's controversial that I just said it's controversial. And here we're getting into the weeds and the problems of this conversation, because it depends on your perspective on whether you view this group, Antifa, as being a problematic group. If you are typically speaking on the right of center, you do. You think that they are a group of left-wing, quote-unquote, radicals, is how you describe them as a right-wing person, that are invoking violence. And therefore, the symbol that they use, regardless of its origin, and keep in mind that symbols change meaning as they move forward. The swastika used to be a symbol of love and harmony.
And peace. Yeah, in Buddhist traditions, yeah.
Yeah, so symbols can change if they are co-opted by groups. So, and I'm not suggesting that's what Antifa's doing here, because I honestly tend to live my life more through their views than I would anyone else, right? So I tend to side with them. But there are people that believe that they do this, and there is no doubt that there have been incidences where there has been violent clashes between right and left-wing folks, particularly in the United States. And this is where this controversy stems from. And MLS does not want to have that symbol in their stadiums. So they banned it outright. They've kicked fans out that continue to display it. Now, this is really where it gets very much... You can't have a rational conversation about anything right now. It doesn't seem to me anyway. And this in particular, you can't, because as soon as I start to defend anything on the club side of things, I am going to be labeled by certain people on the extreme end of this debate as being on the club side completely unquestionably. And my opinion is far more nuanced about this. I recognize, Kevin, that the clubs have the rights as private entities to decide what and what cannot be displayed in their stadiums. I also recognize that by choosing to fight this battle, they're basically making it worse for themselves. And this is where the problem lies. And I tend to believe that what the solution to this is, and we'll get back into the nuts and bolts of what's happening right now in a second, is likely going to be the banning of anything that does not directly relate to the sport.
Yeah.
Whether that's what you want or not, or whether that's what should happen or not, really is a subject of opinion. And neither you or I or anyone listening to this has really the right to tell anyone what their opinion should be on this. But the fact is that it is creating, just look at I made a Twitter poll yesterday. I'll give you the results in a minute. And I said right in the Twitter poll, I do not want to create debate in this. This is not about a debating who's right or wrong in this. I just want to see where people stand on it. And instantly it turned into a debate because people just could not help themselves.
I hope you closed the mentions just before you tweeted that poll. But I agree with you. And the wording as well. The ban is on political signage, political sign, political banners. But when is something political and when is something social? When is something that so there's a lot of that too, where for one person something is political, for one person something has to do with society and social, I would say, courtesy, and not even has to do with anything political. It's not even on a political scale that you would think of, or like election-wise, or are you left, are you right, are you conservative, are you Republican, are you liberal, are you conservative in Canada, depending on what your spectrum is. There's the political that defines this, but there's political that defines social justice, social equality. So those are two different type of political, and one is mixed with the other, and that's a shame too, because we have seen some, I would say, LGBTQ flags rainbow flags being banned as well. And we have seen other offshoot, and the policy is not implemented league-wide the same way, because the policy is so new that pretty much every stadium or every security of every different stadium, Duane, will have a different threshold of what is political, what is not political, what is social justice versus what is political. And how do you define all of this in a black and white way that you can have a consistent rule across the league and not having one fan being banned somewhere in Portland and another fan doing the same thing in Montreal and not being banned? And I think that's what really gets people agitated too, is the implementation of that new rule hasn't gone really smoothly.
No, and look, I hear you person screaming at your device right now that it isn't political to stand up against fascism, and I agree with you. However, if you take a step back from a second and look at what this is causing, it's causing conflict is what it's causing, and this is what the league is looking to resist and to fight back on, is they don't want fights to break out in their stadium over opposing forces. And I agree that this is incredibly problematic. I was on an Uber ride last night with a Uber driver from Florida who decided in the middle of the conversation, the middle of the drive, to start talking about politics with me. And immediately my mind went not like, oh, we could have an engaging conversation. It went, oh God, where is this going? And that is the world that we live in right now.
Oh
no
God,
one wants to deal with this.
Am I close to home? Can I cancel the Uber? Will another one pick me up? Yeah, exactly. It goes really quickly.
I'm good right here. But sir, it's pouring rain.
No. Let me out. Come on. I'll jump if you don't let me out.
Yeah. Anyway, but this is the world we live in. And look, yes, I agree that it's so silly that we're not like that somehow the idea of fighting against isms is a problem. Like, oh my God. But this gets back into like, okay, then why do we have any displays in here? And it gets really slippery really quickly because you mentioned one symbol that I think very, 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 very few people would have a problem with nowadays. And those that do, again, thanks for listening. Goodbye. And that would be the rainbow flag. No one cares anymore, but yet it is ultimately identity. And identity has been turned political in recent years. And it's been turned political not just by those that are fighting for rights, but also those who have been abused because of the way that they were born for years, right? So are we going to ban that if we ban this? Or are we just going to ban everything? And then you get into this mess that I don't know what the answer is. And I think people, ultimately my message with it to people is that I don't think it's as simple as that folks believe in. It's not a black and white issue. It is very gray, very, very much so. And nothing we said, it doesn't matter how many times I try and appease everyone in this conversation, there's still going to be people that are going to be angry at me because I am not fully agreeing with them. And that is the problem with all of these conversations in 2019.
I thought you were going to say this is the problem with the world, which is not wrong either. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, there you go.
Exactly.
I should. There's an election coming up here, so we're not going to talk about this at all. Look, exactly. I think I'm pretty open about where I stand politically, and Kevin, you're, I think, pretty similar in terms of we're both progressive, we're both left of center, but that doesn't mean I'm going to completely black out and just fight against anyone who's opposed to me. I think there's certain things that the right of center I completely disagree with and think they're wrong, basically. But at the same time, I recognize the right to hold those opinions. And I think when we previously had a conversation about this, I brought up the idea that if you're going to be okay with signs that are universally viewed as being symbols of the current left right now, if you're going to be okay with them, are you also going to be okay with signs that are universally identified with the right or slogans? And then you're getting into a mess.
Yeah, maybe that's why we should ban things. But no, it's a good thought experiment too. And I think everyone in this conversation needs to realize the extent of the ramifications of unfortunate ramifications of efforts that they're trying to do. And I think fights in the stands, which started that debate, I guess, and we have seen fights this year for different reasons. Again, you mentioned the right and the left of the spectrum meeting each other in the stands, and it doesn't equal to conversation. Well, it does, but it's not using their mouth to speak, it's using their fist to hit. So that's a different type of conversation that we do not condone. So I do agree with you. And on that note, there's not like a million things that could be done going forward, but trying to diffuse the situation. I think that's what's being done, but it was a bit woefully done, as it always the case, because the corporate world, when it's trying to understand the real world, there's always things lost in translation, and that's what we're having this year in supporter section with the banners being banned is a bit of lost in translation. Duane, just give us the results of your poll, please.
One moment while I get it up. I just have to
I'll let you get it up.
Yeah.
Don't say that out of context. I'll let you get it up, Duane. Where's your poll?
Oh boy,
P-O-L-L.
Get a little.
Not P-O-L-E.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready. Where's your poll? Get your
All right,
poll
my
up.
Poll is this. My poll is up. So I had 4 options, and here I get that the 4 options are never going to universally hit every nuance of opinion. So everyone who kept telling me I was missing an option,
yeah. Well, first of all, Twitter gives you 4 options. You have 4 options for polls. You cannot put 20. Okay.
So yes, by all means, start your own poll if you want. I always, when I set up a pull up, I try and have 2 positive and 2 negative, basically, is how I think of it. Options, kind of hard, middle, right? And this is what I tried to do with this. So I put prefer no signs as option number 1. Some but no iron front, specifically labeled iron front, because that is the banner, the logo that people are talking about right now. I said all signs should be okay. So basically a blank, everyone's okay with signs. That's the issue the option people had issues with, because they said to me, well, what about if we're going to say okay to all signs, then we're going to have to let in Nazi signs, basically is what they said, which to my response to that is, yeah, that's kind of the point of how I worded that. And honestly don't care was my last option. People that are completely just sick of the debate and just don't care about it one way or the other. The results were 19% prefer no signs at all. 6% have an issue with iron front. 42%, so the majority answer was that all signs should be okay, but I think this is significant too. 1/3 of my respondents, and I had close to 700 response to this, said they didn't care. And maybe that's telling too.
It is. But when people say they don't care is probably, stick to sport, that type of ideology, or when they say they don't care, because I did answer that poll. And when I did press I don't care, it's not that I don't care, is this the preferred forum for either side? And that's where I come in and like, well, is this really the best place to make a big splash, right or wrong? Like if you're asking for equality, it is a right mentality and ideology and opinion to have. Is the forum chosen to express that the best one? That's why I chose, honestly, I don't care, because the forum of where it is used, I don't think is the most efficient one.
And that's just it. Are we having a constructive debate by putting these signs out there? And I know I have a lot of friends who are very, very, very strongly believe that these symbols not only should be, that they should be encouraged to be allowed in these stadiums, and everyone should be, that believes this, should be waving them, because they want those that are opposed to the ideas of equality to feel unwelcome in Major League Soccer stadiums. And that's a very sort of idealistic viewpoint that maybe isn't the best business viewpoint from an MLS perspective. And as much as that's cynical to say it that way, it's part of what the reaction from MLS is happening here. We're not going to have an easy response to this. There's not going to be an easy answer to this. I think, as I said earlier, that the response from MLS is eventually going to be that they're going to ban all advertising and all logos that do not have a direct reference to the game that's happening. That's what FIFA does. You can't get you're not getting an iron front flag into a FIFA stadium for a FIFA game. It has to be, if a team is not playing, you have trouble getting flags into a FIFA game. You might be able to get the host country's flag in, but they're pretty hardcore about that. And
even flags,
because they don't want.
When's the last World Cup game or Euro game you've seen with flags being waved?
They just don't have them. Yeah,
exactly.
That's
like,
the
no.
answer. And Major League Soccer is not going to do that, because I think we all understand, and this is another issue that happens with this debate, is that we do understand that they use the supporter groups, which are by and large mostly left of center, as marketing tools. And I get that frustration. I get that frustration when the MLS shows flares on TV and then bans people for it. That there is an inconsistency there, 100%. But by this point in time, you know what the gig is. You bring a flare into a stadium, you're going to get banned, even if you think it's wrong. You bring an iron front flag in lately, particularly in Seattle and Portland, you're getting kicked out. So that act is defiant onto itself, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like trying to, so change the situation here, okay? And we might get this thing. You agree or not, the league and the owners, it's their own stadiums, right? It's their own business, and they can do with it what they please in a way. So let's change MLS and stadium and owners with airlines. Okay, Duane? Just bear with me for a second, okay? It's an airline. You agree or not about security in airports and what you need to do, and should your containers be translucent? Should it be in a plastic bag or not? If you agree or not, or you're right or left or center, it doesn't matter. Trust me, the guy who works at customs and security, he's not because you're right or left, he's gonna let you go through. Oh yeah, this is political, this is not political, you're allowed this, you're not allowed it, period. If you agree with it, you comply, you go in. If you don't, you're not traveling, buddy. And I guess if you use that analogy, you can maybe understand the thinking of the owners and Major League Soccer, but it is a slippery slope, and there is no perfect solution. There is no perfect situation to make everyone feel appeased and at ease with decisions made.
No, there isn't, and we're not going to resolve it here for sure. And there's no easy segue out of this. So,
Well, I have a good one. Here's my great
Okay.
segue. We'll take a small break and we'll come back after this.
There you go.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
Best segue in the history of the show. We're back on Soccer Today. I'm Kevin Laramee with Duane Rollins. As always, Tuesdays are for Europe. A few games this weekend, a lot of games this weekend in Europe. How was European soccer this weekend?
I had a nice little Saturday. Let's not talk about Sunday.
Okay, let's not talk about Sunday, or should we just start with Sunday? I think we should, because some people were waiting a while for it. You see on the results on the screens, Norwich 3, Man City 2. What happened at Carrow Road?
Norwich City played on the front foot, played a smart game. They weren't completely open, as some people thought they might be. I heard predictions in the lead up to this game, like 6-7-0 by some people who thought Norwich was going to go in and just play with their, you know what, to the wall and let City have their way. But they played a medium block, I would call it, and they still got out in the front foot when they needed to. They defended well when they had to, and look, full measure, they won the game. Absolutely, they only had 3 shots, scored 3 goals. Basically on mistakes by City, but I wouldn't say it was a game where they stole it. I'd say that they won that game outright, and City they looked flat, and they looked. And this is, I think, what people are picking Liverpool over City in the league this year. I think that a lot of the reason they are is because they feel, and to be honest, most people aren't, but those that are
certainly
feel that City might. Well, it is early now, but the City might just not have that ability to fight through games like that because of fatigue, mental fatigue. It is hard to win 2 times in a row. It hadn't happened in years. To win 3 in a row is almost unheard of in the modern era of the Premier League. It would be an incredible accomplishment if they could. They still are going to get over 90 points. So if Liverpool's going to beat them, they're going to need to be perfect, and they have been so far. I watched the Liverpool game.
5 games, Dwayne. It's 5 games. Liverpool has slipped at least once or twice in the last ever. So last year they've
had an amazing 18 months. Absolutely.
But even then, 1 or 2 games, you're gonna slip on 1 or 2 games, and that's not a Liverpool Steven Gerrard joke. That's just you're gonna slip on a few games along the season, and that's almost a guarantee. But on the Norwich side, Pukki, wow, Pukki, he's
player of the month.
Player of the month, yes. But you know what? I think he's the reincarnation of Mishu. Remember Mishu with Swansea a few years ago? Very similar situation where a player of a team outside the top 10 is playing his heart's out, his foot out, he's playing his ass out. He's giving his team unexpected results, and that's all on you, Pukki.
Yeah, well, Mishu did that, and then he just fell off a cliff. So hopefully it's not the same thing.
That's
not
why.
Literally, but
that's why I use the same example, because Mishu disappeared. I think he's disappeared off the face of the earth. He's hiding somewhere with Brandon Fraser and Alicia Silverstone in a corner or a ditch somewhere, waiting for a new role to come on. But yeah, Pukki, wow, impressive.
Yeah, Misha seems like he'll be like a designated player for the Columbus Crew in 3 years or something. But it's
I was going to say he's going to show up somewhere in Vegas or something.
It's weird how that one happened. That was the Comet, the definition of a Comet player. But no, Norwich has been fun for everyone this year, and they've been fun. They're part of a trend of teams coming up. Union Berlin and the Bundesliga is playing a similar way, that that's their identity, and they didn't want to redefine how they were going to play in a higher level and let the chips fall as they may. And there's something noble about that. But they did prove, I think, against City that they can adjust and they can reflect the reality of the game they're playing in, and full measure. It is early. It is, no title has ever been lost in September. Well, that's maybe not true. No title's ever
They
been won in
won.
September.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
No one has ever won the title in September.
Yeah, and if City, if this becomes a trend, and I think part of the problem with this game too, if you're looking at City, is they probably had one eye on Ukraine this week. Champions League starts today. City plays tomorrow, so they didn't start Duane for one instance. So that's reflective of them probably trying to prioritize that competition. That I think most people agree is City's main focus in 2019-20. But City also has the resources that they should be able to compete on both fronts and have in the past. I mean, if it wasn't for a weird sort of insanity of the game against Spurs last year, they probably are probably playing Liverpool in the final. They were the best two teams in Europe. So I don't know what to say about it beyond the ball is round.
The ball's round, and
yeah.
sometimes it doesn't go your way. Sometimes you work hard, you go to the corners, you work hard around the boards, but the puck doesn't go your way, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I've been overly spoiled. Like, if you want to have me a partisan reaction to this, my reaction was good for them. Honestly, like a good day out of the stadium for the Norwich fans. And I'm not trying to be condescending when I say that.
No,
honestly,
you're right.
Did you see the reaction?
He's like, yeah, it's okay. I had my fair share of win. You can have this one. I get it. Yeah. My game of the weekend, Duane, was Brest versus Rennes, because Rennes was on top of the league and they were rolling and they were equal on points to PSG, and they're facing Brest, which is a small side of Ligue 1 on the road. And I was like, yeah, Rennes, if they get the points there, maybe they can continue on their great run, which did not happen. 0-0 between Brest and Rennes. There was a few great results too in Ligue 1, Duane. Marseille on the road to Monaco, beating them 4-3. Monaco right now, the one spot before the last in France, and for a club that has the money as Monaco does. Yeah, Monaco, it's not going well. The coach probably not going to last next few weeks. Will Thierry Henry be hired again? I doubt. But that's a few results in France. Duane, what was your game of the week off the top of your head? I know you watched some Serie A with some Fiorentina games as well.
Yeah, I watched Fiorentino Juve, which was a 0-0, but it was a very entertaining 0-0, very passionate. Frank Ribéry, he's like reinvented himself there. Like, this guy, like, I can't bring my head around him as like a sort of like wearing a cape and like rescuing a team, but he was tracking back. Ronaldo had like 4 steps at one point, and he like caught up, did a tackle, like got stuck in type thing. And this is not your image of good old Frank, is it? But nonetheless,
no. Usually it's with a big beer in his hands and somewhere drinking it and having a red shirt on.
Golden steak, gold steak.
Oh yeah, the gold steak with Salt Bay. Oh my God, I've seen this video so many times.
Yeah, but it was a highly entertaining game to watch for a 0-0. I was watching it at the same time as I was watching Leicester United, and I had that game on my phone, the Juve game on my phone, and obviously the TV had the Premier League game on, and I was watching my phone a lot more than that dull thing that they were playing out in front of me. But
yeah,
I also watched. I was keeping an eye on, same difference, when the City game was on. I had the Bayern Munich Leipzig game on my phone, and
1-1.
Obviously City was taking my attention, but that certainly was, I think, I don't know, telling. It was kind of it was 1-1, off in many ways. Bayern got the early lead. Leipzig got scored just before half, and then they played no goals in the second half to a 1-1 draw, and it didn't really prove much of anything this year, other than I think Leipzig is a little bit better than we thought going in, and I think Bayern's about where we thought, which is a lot worse than they have been in the past.
Yeah,
but they're still.
So it means Bundesliga might be a 3-team race this year. It might have Dortmund, Leipzig, and Bayern Munich going after the Bundesliga, which is a welcome change for the Bundesliga.
For sure. And more to the point, and this is, I think, my overall trend of the weekend, is that I, as I just explained, found myself torn away from the Premier League on 2 separate occasions because City's fault this year in dropping the points against Spurs has made it a 5-point lead for Liverpool early, but I think we all realize that this is very likely going to be very much a 2-team race. And beyond that, your Arsenal's, your United's, even Spurs struggles early, have Chelsea, obviously, with the transfer ban, has made those teams less compelling to me anyway. So I found myself getting drawn more and more to leagues that I haven't watched in a while because conversely, they seem to be getting more competitive. Juve is, for the first draw, put them outside of the top. They're no longer leading. This is the first time in something like 24 months that they have not been leading Serie A at all times. They have gone pole to pole for like 3 straight seasons. It's nuts. And this is a good sign, and it's a good sign that we're more compelled to watch those games. You're watching a lot of Ligue 1 games for the sound of it. So I think that's maybe the message that we're getting here, is that even though the Premier League's top 2 teams are certainly playing at an excellent clip, it's almost become dull in a way because we're not used to seeing it in that league. We're used to seeing a lot less sort of competitiveness, and I think, or a lot more competitiveness, I should say. And I think that what you're seeing is this sort of conservative nature of the Premier League, where you have these top 2 teams that are there, whole bunch of like 3 or 4 teams that are kind of just trying to get top 4, and then the rest just trying to survive. And that's not that compelling because it leads to a lot of conservative play. And I've found myself less and less compelled to watch the English league over the other leagues, and that's a change in my behavior, certainly in the last little while. Just something to think about and keep an eye on moving forward.
It is something to keep an eye moving forward, and for me, it's been the same. Of course, some of this has been generated by our show here, because we talk more on Tuesdays now about Europe and not just the Premier League like years past. I am finding myself watching a lot more games than in the past, and that's going to be, for me, a very important part of my routine, is to listen to a lot of Premier League and European games every single week for this show. But Duane, today starts the Champions League. It starts today with the group stage and a couple of interesting games across the European landscape. Of course, it's going to be on the zone. Inter Milan versus Slavia Praha, Lyon Zenit, Chelsea Valencia, Red Bull Genk. That's going to be a very fun one. Too bad it's not Ghent. It's Genk, but not Jonathan David. But Red Bull, we do have Jesse Marsch. Napoli Liverpool at 3 p.m. as well. Ajax versus Lask. And today, in American newspapers, Ajax took out a full page of publicity to talk about Dest, the American player playing for Ajax, and his future, and to promote the game today. Benfica, RB Leipzig, Dortmund, Barcelona. 8 games today in the Champions League.
Yeah, I find myself, again, I just had a conversation about how maybe the English Premier League hasn't been compelling me as much as the past. The same with the Champions League group stage. It's been a few years coming now, but you're always excited when it gets back going. The Ajax situation where they're trying to go after the U.S. market makes a lot of sense to me. It is a club that, I don't know how you say this diplomatically, that will very much appeal to hipsters, is what I'm going to say. And that's kind of the market that they should be going for. And we're at the stage, I think, in soccer fandom in North America where that kind of niche following is something you can really, play on, because a lot of people have picked their team for a while. So if you're kind of new and you want to be a little different, which everyone wants to be a little different nowadays.
Well, it's 2019. That's why FC St. Pauli and the New York Cosmos are so popular.
Exactly. So, or Union Berlin, for that matter, is also very, very populist, very counterculture. So that's which is an opposite of populist. I realize. Sorry, we're too political in the brain here today. Anyway,
it's a slippery slope type of day.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a smart move for them and to try and break in there. And everyone's, of course, trying to break into the U.S. market, except for the Spanish teams, it seems. Valencia seems like they should be a part of those.
That's true. Well, you know what? The Spanish teams in Montreal with Barcelona's school, and there's a few other schools, they try, but they're trying to milk their fans for the most amount of money possible, too. And at the end of the day, it doesn't create a fan, it creates a customer, and the customer gets burned when it's too expensive, and then he just follows another team, which is going to happen eventually.
There's a topic for a slow day altogether, the branded academies and how they're
cash grabs.
Poisonous, I'll say, to the overall development
I agree.
of the game in North America.
I agree. Hope you enjoyed the show today. We did try to do our best with what we had. And it's not an easy show, but we think we gave our best, our all. I give ourselves a good 85% today, Duane.
All right, well, we'll see what our listeners say. I'm sure we're getting yelled at somewhere, but that's the problem with the debate, which was the whole point. At any rate, there's going to be a meeting on this between MLS and the Cascadia groups, so we'll see what comes of it. It's not a topic I want to cover every day, Kevin, on this show, but I do think it has become such omnipresent within the MLS discussion right now that it's hard to ignore.
It's impossible to ignore, and that's why we're not ignoring it anymore. On that note, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Laramee, and this show at Soccer Today SPN, live Monday to Friday on our Twitter feed and podcast available anywhere you get your podcasts, and on our YouTube page, Facebook page, and on sportspodcastnetwork.com. Video replays available everywhere as well. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the world of football with a soccer perspective. And until then, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.